Today I've got a guest, I've got my friend Pete here, and I thought it'd be really good to also have a male perspective on this because I want to talk about how to approach a woman from a man's perspective, and then from my perspective as a woman, like how we should actually give the green light. So Pete, how would you approach a woman if you saw a woman that you liked?
So I think for almost all guys, approaching a woman that you think is attractive just in the street or something is actually really, really difficult. I think it's a very small proportion of men that can confidently go and speak to a girl in the street without any kind of signs that she wants you to chat to them. You know, maybe if you see a girl and she keeps smiling at you, okay, maybe you can go over.
Yeah.
But I think otherwise, it's maybe even a no-no for me. But I think there are loads of ways that you might be able to approach a girl just to say hello and get to know them in different contexts. I think events is a really easy one. You know, when you're in any kind of event that where you're not holding a responsibility in terms of work, I think it's a great thing to just meet people, go and chat, say, hi, I'm Pete, what's your name? Take a breath if you're nervous in between, and just start talking about anything. Ask people some questions, basic questions. What's your name? What do you do? It's very London to ask them what they do, but it's how we roll. And I think, yeah, it's kind of like a similar formula. The real key is, and I'm not saying that I was one of these people that when I did this all the time, but I think the key is actually just to do it. If you get a couple of cues, that woman might be interested in talking to you in a romantic context. And a lot of the time, it doesn't have to end up being a romantic context. You might just say hello, you meet them, it could end up being something useful for work, you know, maybe you never talk again, whatever. But yeah, the key thing is if you do get any cues, try and do something because you never know what might come from it.
But okay, so what's an example of a cue?
I think a cue, I mean, the classic one, I mean, I didn't talk about like being in bars and clubs, but you know, if a girl looks over a few times, probably she's interested in you going and chatting to them. There's a very small chance that, you know, she was accidentally looking your way repeatedly. Maybe check behind you first. But yeah, if a girl is looking over, probably she's happy for you to go and say hi. Really difficult in bars and clubs, especially if they're sitting in a group of friends and stuff.
That's so intimidating, isn't it? If like
Very.
a woman's just surrounded by women, it can be really hard to feel like you can infiltrate that group, right?
So back in the day, you would wait till they go to the bar.
Yeah, okay.
And when they go to the bar, you go to the bar.
Yeah.
And you go and just say hey, and if you have a nice chat at the bar, then great. Maybe you get their number. If they're giving you monosyllabic responses, then don't worry about it. Get on with your life.
So it's about taking the cues, but also picking up the hint if there isn't actually that interest in progressing the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think if a girl is interested, she'll ask you a question back. And it's just how people are. You ask them a question, they'll ask you back, and the conversation will flow. If it doesn't, you might need to just let it go.
I like that. Okay, so the first tip for women is if you're in a big group of girls is to make sure that you do have opportunities where you do separate and you're on your own so that someone can approach you and that's not so intimidating, right?
Definitely.
And also to smile and to look repeatedly. And then something else you said was about like how, and I think it might take the pressure off, is that you just have a joy in meeting new people and in networking.
Yeah.
And that takes the pressure off, right?
That does take the pressure off, I think. And I think probably taking the pressure off if you frame yourself in the place that you know, this interaction doesn't matter at the moment. There's nothing here, right? I don't know this person. If in 5 minutes I still don't know this person, no big deal, right? There's nothing to be lost. But I think, I mean, for me, I would almost think about scenarios that are a bit different to this. So these are kind of like cold interactions, but I think probably what are much more fruitful and easier for men to navigate are sort of like slightly warm interactions. So this might be like, you know, when a conversation's already been started by your group and their group and you want to chat to them, then you would actually just make the effort to go and talk to that person. You kind of seize that moment. You have these things when like groups of friends in work, potentially like people chatting at the water cooler, all those things. I think these things are very real ways to start human relationships that could be anything on the scale. It could be a colleague, it could be an amazing friend, it could be your wife or husband. But for me, that's always been something that, yeah, like you say, I find it quite enjoyable, like to meet these people, to find out bits about them, get ideas from them. I think get inspiration from them. Me and Delphine were just talking a bit earlier today about how it's really important to have people in your life that do inspire you, that kind of help you to channel like your passion and your creativity, and your drive. So I think for me that's part of the piece of meeting people generally. So I think that probably does make it easier. Obviously I don't really have to do this, but maybe for some people, if you can think of it that way, that might also make the whole interaction of meeting new people easier as well.
And less scary, because it feels less like a rejection of yourself as like a
Yeah.
partner, and just like, no, I'm just curious, I'm interested in this person, I want to have a conversation, and maybe I'm going to learn something. Maybe I'm going to walk away with a number, maybe I'm going to walk away with a date, or maybe I'll just walk away with a good story or an interesting conversation. And I think if you can separate yourself from that kind of deep rejection, it's a lot easier as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, how would you, Pete, advise people to not be scared of rejection, and like what's a way that we can overcome that and actually be open to just starting new conversations? And you know, if it completely like tanks, then that's fine, you just shake it off.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So one of my ex-girlfriends, now my best friend, was really struggled with self-confidence, and actually I think probably not helpful is talking about myself, probably helpful is talking about watching her grow over the years. And this is still a challenge for her. Like, it's not like she completely transformed who she was, but it was really interesting watching her challenge herself to go and do things that addressed the different facets of why she felt insecure about going and talking to someone. So one part was the rejection possibility, another part was actually her own things about how she felt about herself, and maybe she was worried that, you know, for example, she lives in another country, she couldn't speak their language, so she goes to language classes. And then she was also worried maybe about, speaking in public, and this like whole idea of speaking to people she doesn't know. So she goes to one of these things called Toastmasters, where you get up and give speeches to front of people you don't know. I think so. There's definitely things that, I mean, I've watched her do these things, and I would say that she is much more confident socially than she was like when we were together a long time back. And I think that's part of a testament to the work she's done. She's chosen certain activities, she's persevered with them, and that's helped her to build a confidence that wasn't necessarily there. And on the flip side, there's this thing about worrying about the actual rejection part. And I don't know an answer, especially for men, how you deal with this. I think the people who don't seem to, there's guys out there that don't seem to care, and they're like, whatever, water off a duck's back. And they just go out and do it. And I guess maybe that if you can adopt that mentality of this doesn't matter, like, I'm just putting myself out there, I'm happy with myself that I made the move. And like, yeah, if it was challenging for you to sort someone in a work event, then great if you challenge to talk to someone in the work event. And if you know, work events are fine, but you're scared of meeting a girl in a bar, and then you spoke to a girl in a bar, that's pretty cool. And I actually do remember, I can't remember exactly the circumstances, but there was definitely one time when I did one of these things, and I was like, you know, Pete, that was good. You know, it didn't quite work out, but I'm glad that you went and did that. Like, and that's a bit of growth for you. And I felt stronger as a result of it. And I think if you can take that mentality forward, that's really helpful for you. Not just in terms of meeting girls in bars, and also just in life.
Definitely, and I think that it is a muscle that you have to build, right? Like this kind of confidence, being able to talk to new people, being able to just be presentable and to grow in that charisma. Because I think a lot of people sometimes think like, oh, that person's just really naturally charismatic, but they don't see that there's actually been a lot of work in that as well. Like every single conversation that you've had, even if it's not a romantic one, that you had to push yourself to just, you know, introduce yourself to someone at a work event or something, it does help you to get further. And what I like about your ex is that she was really working on herself outside of the dating realm.
Yeah,
like she was just like, I just want to be good at presenting, and then that makes you more confident in potentially talking to potential suitors. Okay. And something I want to ask you, because you were talking about like group situations, so what's a good way for a man or a woman to really kind of single someone out is a weird way of saying it, but you know, like make them feel special? Because obviously if I'm just like in a group, I won't necessarily pick up the sign that a guy might like me. I might just think that he's enjoying being in the group.
I think, a confident guy will make sure that you know. I'm pretty sure that, a guy who's comfortable and confident with girls, group settings, it'll be pretty obvious that he's like, I like this girl. And they'll do that, and they will make an effort to talk to them almost immediately. they'll probably almost bypass some of the other women in the group like they don't exist. And I've seen that happen. So I think that would be quite clear. I think if a guy is not so confident, I think ways that you can do that, I think being really directive, you probably make sure that you remember that girl's name. You'd probably address a question to the group and then her directly. Specifically, I mean, obviously, like, you know, things like smiling, but you don't want to sit there grinning across the table at a group of girls. But I think there are little things like that, saying someone's name, directing the conversation towards them, inquiring about them as well as everyone. It's the sort of things that you could do that make it really clear to a girl that you're a bit interested in them, definitely.
It's funny because actually when I used to interview celebrities, like the media training that some of them have is to always say your name back. Because it makes you as the journalist just feel immediately warmer to them. Because you're like, you know, like someone's like, oh, that was a really great question. Thanks, Delphine. I'm like, they know my name. And like, obviously I was probably the 112th interview that they had. But I do think that that's really impactful. And as soon as someone does use my name, I immediately think, like my interest is kind of piqued. I think they obviously have taken note of me. Okay, so like what do you think is the problem? Like why? Because there's this statistics that says that I think it's something like 74% of men between the age of 18 to 35 have not approached a woman in the last year. And then it's something like 65% of women wish, of the exact same age bracket, that men approach them more. So what's going on?
74%.
It was really high. It's a high statistic.
Okay,
Don't quote me on it though, because that might not be the right number, but it was something like that. It was shocking. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, because these are the years where we're meant to like, I don't know, be living with joy and just being meeting new people and thriving.
Okay. What do I think is going on? Well, I would say one thing about living with joy and thriving, that can be totally done when you're single.
I love that.
So I would say first of all that.
Yeah.
And I would say some of the best, most fun years of my life have been in a place where I was single and I wasn't approaching women. I did still meet a lot of girls, or maybe that took the edge off, I don't know. But I was definitely not out there going to like meet women in bars and stuff, but I had an amazing time. But what I think is out there, I think it's a challenging time these days to go out and meet girls for guys. I think the context in which men meet women have been narrowed, often for really good reasons. Like I think the workplace has become, where most people used to meet their partners at university or work. And now the workplace in particular is almost like getting more and more off limits. I met my girlfriend at work. It was interesting. There was a lot went through my mind before we embarked on our relationship, a lot to think about. So I think that makes it harder. Men are definitely scared. Not just of rejection, but also maybe of all the other implications that come with, trying to, meet a girl in the wrong context. I think as well that the way people socialise is changing. And I think that also makes it harder. I don't know statistics, I think people drink less, people go to pubs less, they go to like the weekly club less. Mm-hmm. They focus more on big events, and when they go to big events, they go with big groups of friends because everyone's been saving up for this big event.
Yeah, and they're your security blanket as well.
And so the likelihood of, let's imagine,
branching out.
Yeah, imagine the guy who's like, I see this really nice girl over there, penetrating her group of 8 friends to go and chat to her in the concert or whatever it is just much less likely. Whereas before, you'd all be in the pub and everyone would be drinking for 3 or 4 hours, and people would be meeting at the bar and meeting, anyway, all this stuff. So I think the context has been changed a lot in terms of face-to-face. And I think probably a lot of men's confidence is really struggling from online dating. I think online dating, again, I don't have statistics. I've seen lots of things about this on Instagram, but this the way online dating has shaped like the male population into this kind of pyramid where this kind of 6 foot, handsome, successful guy in online matches with every girl. And every girl matches with that guy, and then none of those women then match with the rest of the guys, and I think that probably hits a lot of guys' confidence, and so they don't have this kind of public-facing social life where they're going to meet people, and then when they're back at home bored, think it'd be nice to meet a girl, they go and swipe, and they get their matches. And actually, I got very, very few matches when I tried whichever Hinge.
Shame on you, women.
And stuff. So I think probably,
which is wild
probably both of these
because
things are changing things.
Yeah, I do think online dating has completely changed the climate, and I think that I don't know, like A, it's very transactional. B, I think you just start feeling very judged only on your appearance, and then you start to lose the confidence and the charisma that could actually uplift that no matter what you look like. Because obviously in real life situations, as I was saying to you earlier, like I've been attracted to some very like quirky looking men just because they were very humble or very charming or very funny or like any of that, and that just doesn't lift on like a 2-dimensional photo.
Definitely.
On a dating app, which is why like I think it's changed the dating scene a lot, and I think it's been quite damaging. Like I do think men's confidence is low. I also think women's confidence is lower as well, and I think women are really desiring men to take the lead more, but then men are feeling like they don't want to cross a boundary or overstep, and they also just don't want to go through the rejection, because obviously when you're swiping and stuff or not getting swiped on, that feels like constant rejection.
Yeah, and I think another thing, kind of leaning into something a bit bigger here, but I guess when I think about when my parents met and when they got together, sounds kind of bad, but I guess the world was a bit smaller, so they had like a smaller network. I think people were much less exposed to all the different things out there, and I think nowadays we do have this kind of, we're sport for choice, as it were, and what was a good man 25 years ago for most women probably nowadays would be considered like pretty average man, I think, when we look at what they would aspire to have in their lives, and maybe that's even the same for men thinking about women as well. I don't have a solution for this, but I think that definitely affects people, and I know that. And I look at that almost from my own life as I grew up. So I remember when I was in school and sixth form, how I thought about stuff. And then I went to university, and there were like loads of girls, and all of a sudden it was different. And
the world just getting
and the world got bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden I was like.
And now it's limitless because of the internet. So it does feel, and we all, a lot of us have this mindset of like, oh, but there could be something better. And a lot of us, even if we don't admit it, are almost commitment phobic because of that, because we don't want to feel that we are settling. And I think that's why, like, I think it's really interesting when you said that you were really thriving and joyful while single. Because if you can get to that point where you're happy in yourself, you're gonna attract, your life is already full. So you're not just like trying to squeeze someone in, like a square into a circle. It's like someone who genuinely is gonna compliment you. So what advice would you give to us singles who want to live that, but also sometimes let the loneliness or the kind of anxiety or the depression get to us, like, because it is hard. I think when you do want to be in a relationship and you're not, it can take up so much of your mental space.
Totally. What advice do I have? Interesting. I guess I'll pick up on one thing. I think that if you can find a place where you're happily single, that's going to bring people into your life. I think that's like inevitable. Easier said than done, and everyone's way to that path to that kind of point is different. But I think that's definitely something in terms of like. And I spent 5 years unhappily single about 7-8 years ago, and I think advice. I think it's really good to have friends around. I think it is good to talk about it, actually. I think it's really good to share how you feel and think, but I think you have to be really conscious to keep like a certain kind of energy in your social circle, especially those of us who are, people who are more, you get your energy from other people. I wouldn't necessarily say extroverts, but I think it's really important to have certain kinds of energies around you, because that will help you, so it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel lonely, and it's not fun, obviously. So whilst you still have those moments, you have people that help pull you out of them and pull you towards positive opportunities. I don't know, it's particularly for men, I think as well. I think I became much more emotionally, I would say, connected. In my early 30s, I actually started to feel my emotions in a much stronger way. And there was a point where I actually started to almost enjoy some of my negative emotions, which was really interesting for me. I hadn't really had many negative emotions until my early 30s. So there was this period where, especially my later, my kind of 35, 36, when I actually felt sadness, when I felt the loneliness, I actually started to be able to kind of appreciate the whole emotion and how that felt for me. And it was almost part of like the role to go back up again. And I think that being okay with all those things, and as well as having ways to find back to the positive feelings, are all good things as well.
Yeah, I think that's really uplifting because it is hard, and like I'll never say like, oh no, you can always be so happy single, like it's great. No, but what I like about Pete's approach though is that it's always just about improving yourself and doing that through connection with others. So it's like building out a social circle that excites you and energizes you. Like we were talking about like adult friendships, and I was like, you know, I'm really craving some friendships where like I just feel very like in admiration and kind of just inspired by them. And we were talking about how even with friends, like it's because you are attracted to something in the other person. And we don't mean that in like a relationship way, but just to become a magnetic person and to have magnetic people around you. So it might be, you know, Pete was going through this emotional intelligence kind of growth, and I'm sure being around people that you could actually talk about that with was really uplifting. But yes, I think that's very encouraging. But just to bring it back to like how to approach a woman, how to also green light, I wondered if you're okay to share one of the questions that your current girlfriend, who's amazing, she's so beautiful and so lovely, that she asked you quite early on when you guys were friends, and you kind of had this like, oh, that's such an obvious green light. Because you did mention as well that you guys met at work, and I have had some comments from people who are like, how do I, you know, drop the hanky for someone at work? So what advice would you give there? And yeah, can you share the example of how she made it quite obvious for you?
Sure. I think there are loads of ways that people can subtly show that they're interested in a person as a person rather than a colleague at work. But in our particular case, we met properly on her first day, and we were all sitting in the office, and I had a bag of sweets, and I was just offering them out, saying, "Hey, would you like a sweet?" So she was like, "Yeah, I'll have a sweet." And that's how I got, you know, I already knew her name, but we met there. And then later on that day, people popped out at lunch, and so we ended up walking together. And in, you know, literally the first 3 minutes of our entire conversational history, she asked me if I had kids, which I thought was a really interesting question. And I think it's an unusual question to ask a man very early on in your work relationship. And I think that's quite a strong, I potentially would be interested question there. So that is, for me, that was a strong green light. And I remember thinking when she was, you know, months later, she's like, "How did you know that I liked you?" And I was like, it was pretty obvious, like from third minute. So yeah.
I also like that you said something to me earlier that she's very emotionally direct. So is that something that you like and appreciate about her, and that you think made it a lot easier to do that transition from colleagues to couple?
Yeah, absolutely. I think working out what a girl thinks, wants, etc., can be really complicated. I think it's really helpful to just make it easy for men just to say what you want and when you want it. And I find it with her, I find it really easy. And we have almost like discussion and arrangements around certain things that are challenging for me, and we have our solutions that we've laid out together, and we kind of agreed them, and that makes it really easy. It's like, you know, and one of those things is actually birthdays. Like, I struggle, I'm not into birthdays. I dislike celebrating my own birthday. I don't like receiving presents. I don't like giving presents. I find the thought of, I don't know what I would want to receive for myself, let alone what someone else would want to receive for them, beyond obvious and basic things. So for example, one of the first conversations we had when we got together was, she's like, "Well, I like birthdays, so this is what you need to do." And she laid it out. And if I do those things, she's actually really happy. Yeah, even though she told me to do them.
But you know what, that kind of transparency though, I hear that it's like exactly what is needed in a relationship, because it's like you lay out the expectations and then you're very happy to receive them when that person has reciprocated and been like, "Great, I've heard that birthdays matter to you and you matter to me, so now that the birthdays matter to me."
Definitely. And I think there's two things as well, because like, honestly, people would see that and be like, "Oh, but you didn't put any thought into it." But that's okay for her, because I put the thought into our relationship in other ways outside of the birthday, and she knows that, and we can have that conversation. So for her, she's getting both of the things she wants: special birthday, and she knows that I put the thought into the relationship in all the other ways that we do stuff together. And I think that's, for me, that conversation about is actually really helpful. And I think, directness can be really valuable.
I love that. But she was never like super direct that she could be rejected though, right? Like she kind of just would put out the little feelers and the green light and let you make the move.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you think that's the right way it should be? That women just like, the drop in the hanky needs to be way more obvious, the green lights need to be more obvious, and then we wait? Or do you think that's too passive?
No, I think it depends on the woman, but I think if you're a woman that wants a guy who is more of the leader, in the relationship, and the guy, who is confident and wants to be the one who says, do you want to marry me? Yeah, then I think you have to draw that line and not take over completely. But I think make it easy, because it really is hard. It really is hard.
Okay, awesome. So to wrap up, us women, we need to be, to give those cues. So those cues are like smiling, looking a few times, being quite direct, maybe asking quite a, alluring question like, oh, do you have kids? Or something that just might make them think like, oh, well, she wouldn't ask me that, she wasn't interested. And also just being interested in them as a person. I liked how you said that. You were like, we were just interested in each other as people. And I think that helps, especially in like those environments like work, where it can be really easy for it to feel completely off bounds or inappropriate. So you just want to like set up that friendship.
Definitely. And I think, we're talking about in person here. But actually, when people talk about, messaging is a massive part of dating nowadays. Just asking questions, just getting in touch and asking a couple of questions. And if the guy doesn't come back to you with some positivity, then don't worry about that. But you didn't put anything out. You said, hey, how's it going? How was your project at work? Whatever. And that's a conversation starter. And if the guy doesn't come back with something, from that, then you don't have to worry about it again. But you can put it out there, and it's not a problem.
And there's no answer an answer.
Yeah.
No answer's an answer. And then in how to approach women, you were saying like just simple, like, hi, I'm Pete. What's your name? Or how are you?
Yeah.
Or talking about the event, contextual, situational. What else did you say about how to approach women?
I would say that unless you're the kind of guy that is very confident, then having a line is really difficult to use for me. I think if you're not feeling that, then it's going to make it a real mess. So I think just keeping it simple is usually best.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Pete. And I'm interested to hear what you guys think of me having a guest, because I might have more guests on as well. But thank you guys for watching, and God bless. Bye.